You know it's wrong. You saw it with your own eyes. You understand that if you speak up, you will lose everything. But if you stay silent, you become an accomplice to a thief stealing an entire soul. This is the choice Lydia Hale, a waitress living in a rundown Brooklyn apartment, must face when she accidentally uncovers that millionaire Elias Wren's girlfriend is plotting to drain his fortune. She decides to speak out. And the next morning, a man in a gray suit appears at her door carrying a black box and an invitation that will change everything. Lydia Hale lives between two worlds. One is where classical art whispers silently through the fading brushstrokes of Vermeer and Caravaggio. The other, loud, lavish, ostentatious, unfolds each night at the Aurora Club, the five-star restaurant suspended on the 41st floor of a gleaming glass tower on Central Park West. There, Lydia does not exist as a person. She becomes part of the atmosphere, a faint movement weaving between white-clothed tables, slipping past velvet chairs and crystal wine glasses. Lydia is 24 years old. Her brown hair is pulled back neatly, her steps as light as a breath. She serves as though trained in classical ballet, precise, discreet, never missing a beat. Yet no one notices her. Perhaps that is the first rule of survival at Aurora. By day, Lydia sits quietly in the Parsons Library, flipping through hefty volumes whose old paper scent seems to fill her chest. She studies the handling of light in one 7th century Dutch painting, body proportions, and hidden symbolism. These things enrich and resonate in her mind, even as in real life she eats cold sandwiches alone in her shabby attic apartment, where the bathroom light bulb frequently flickers and her mother's medication still waits in a yellow envelope. When night falls, Lydia dons her black uniform and steps into a role that goes unnamed. At Aurora, silence is the most valuable currency. The patrons here do not appreciate an overly conspicuous presence. She serves like a painless incision, unobtrusive yet indispensable. Elias Wren is one of them. He always occupies table 9. Silver hair, gray suit, and expressions so indifferent as if nothing in the world could surprise him. The man who turned Brooklyn's worst neighborhoods into some of the priciest real estate in America doesn't need noise to project power. His silence alone commands respect. Each visit, he orders the same: turmeric steamed cod and a glass of burgundy, never glancing at the menu, never in a hurry. And strangely, he remembers Lydia's name, a small detail that means everything to her. Lydia had been serving Elias for almost a year. She'd never seen him with a companion more than once except for Celine Leclerc. Celine was no gentle beauty. She was a living statement. A face so perfect it might have been generated by an algorithm. A smile warm enough not to arouse suspicion, cold enough to maintain distance. Her dress was couture with cutout sleeves, her perfume a blend of Hermes and expensive genuine leather. Every gesture felt choreographed by a Hollywood screenwriter. Lydia couldn't help watching her, not out of jealousy, but because Celine was like a living painting, magnificent yet soulless, a counterfeit portrait no one dared ask if it was real. That evening, Celine arrived again, sitting across from Elias, pouring him white wine, smiling softly, taking his hand as if they were already married. Yet Lydia, standing close enough to hear the clink of glasses, felt a chill. She didn't know why, but in an instant she saw something behind that flawless facade. A fleeting distraction in Celine's eyes, a hint of disdain, a breath out of sync. Then Celine's gold-plated iPhone vibrated, perched arrogantly on the edge of the appetizer plate. Lydia was refilling water when the screen lit up, and in that frozen moment, she saw the message: "Transfer $3 million. Good luck with that sucker tonight." Her hand didn't tremble, but her heart felt crushed. This was no ordinary text. It was proof. A bloody incision between the real world and the fabricated one she'd thought existed only in movies. Lydia stepped back and resumed her work as if nothing had happened. Yet her mind raced. Could it be? Should she keep silent or step out of the shadows to shatter a velvet-wrapped lie?
Welcome to 30 Millionaire Stories, where success meets solitude, and every story heals a hidden wound. Subscribe and discover the heart behind the fortune.
The air in Aurora that evening was so thick you could choke on it. Tension oozed from the velvet-upholstered chairs, creeping across the large windows where the city glittered below. Lydia stood upright, hands clasped behind her back, eyes fixed on the man seated before her, Elias Wren, and the woman she suspected was no longer who she pretended to be. Every fiber of Lydia's being warned her to remain silent. But some things once seen cannot be unseen. Her heart pounded as if it would burst through her thin blouse. The silver tray in her hand trembled slightly. She drew a sharp breath, took a single step forward, and whispered one sentence into Wren's ear, a sentence never recorded anywhere, yet enough to shatter the world she knew. Celine turned, her gaze no longer sweet. It was a mixture of shock, rage, and contempt. Lydia felt as though she had ripped away the curtain on a stage play in front of hundreds of spectators. She knew forgiveness would not be hers. No more than 3 minutes later, the staff door swung open. Marco, the restaurant manager, entered with the air of a man beyond questions. He did not shout. He merely looked at Lydia with the expression of someone pressing delete on a system. "You've crossed the line," he said, then turned to the guests. "We apologize for the inconvenience." Wren said nothing. He stared into his wineglass, so quietly present it was as if he were not there. Celine seized the moment to play the victim. Placing a hand on her chest, her voice quivered loud enough for the entire room to hear, "I don't understand why she hates me so much." All Lydia could do was stand there, in the uniform she had carefully laundered last night, swallowing a truth that hadn't yet broken. Whispers began to spread between tables like fire through dry paper. Then she was asked to leave. No apology, no chance to explain further, just the ruthless dismissal of the elite, discarding whatever made them uncomfortable, even if it was the truth. Outside, snow began to fall. Lydia walked slowly along the cobblestone street, her old shoes soaked through, her toes numb with cold. In her hand were the unfinished order pad and the last receipt Elias had signed. She didn't read it at once. She only wanted to leave that place, to escape the scent of expensive perfume, the disdainful glances, and the feeling of humiliation choking her throat. Back in her attic apartment, Lydia collapsed onto the cold wooden floor. Her legs still trembled, whether from the cold or from bitterness, she couldn't tell. She opened the receipt, partly to see if she'd been labeled rude or impertinent as usual. But the tip line showed 0, and just below, in that familiar slanted handwriting, a single line. "Thank you for your honesty. L." Only 6 words, yet like a lifeline thrown into an icy ocean. Lydia sat there for a long time, her eyes fixed on that scrap of paper, questions echoing in her mind with no answers. Had Elias Wren trusted her? Or was it merely the courtesy of a man who didn't want to feel guilty? Deep down, she knew, he had seen something, or at least, he had seen her. For the first time, someone at Aurora had looked straight at Lydia and not treated her like a shadow. She had still lost her job, still had no money to pay for her mother's medicine, still just a girl with an unfinished art degree. But tonight, Lydia Hale had done something few in that world dared to do. She spoke the truth and faced it alone. Could a single line be the beginning of something much greater? Or would everything end here? If you were Lydia, would you risk your entire future to speak the truth? Dear viewers, take a moment to relax or grab a glass of water, then stay tuned for the next twist. Comment 1 if you enjoyed the story and let us know you're still here. The city hadn't fully woken yet. On the thinly misted sidewalk of a Monday morning, the slow roll of Bentley wheels outside the old brick building in Bushwick jolted Lydia awake. She hadn't slept long. All night she'd tossed and turned, haunted by the engine's rumble from downstairs and the memory of Celine's final glance icy, as if Lydia were nothing more than dust clinging to her gown. She sat up, her hair tangled and loose. The room looked the same, peeling walls, an unwashed kitchen sink, light seeping through the thin crack in the door like a thread. But outside the window, something was different. A man in a gray suit was standing next to a silver-gray Bentley, holding a small black box. He didn't knock. When Lydia cracked a window, he simply nodded once, then turned away as if his task were done. The box sat on the third-floor landing, between two doors plastered with overdue notices and abortion service flyers. It was the strangest thing Lydia had ever seen in this neighborhood. Sleek, solid, and with an unmistakable air of danger. She carried it into her room, uncertain whether to open it, but her hand moved before her mind could object. The lid flipped open slowly, and inside were 3 items. An old-fashioned phone, the kind only the exceedingly wealthy use, one without apps, a titanium Centurion card embossed with her name in exquisite raised letters, and a card, jet black, with no pattern or flourish but exuding more luxury than anything she'd ever held. In sharp, slanted handwriting, "I suspected it all along, but lacked proof. You provided it and lost your job for your honesty. I will repay you with trust. Signed, E. Wren." Lydia froze. She read and reread the message, afraid she was imagining things. Her breath came in short gasps. Her finger brushed the back of the card where another line, not handwritten but embossed, appeared. "Press green when you're ready." She stared at the phone. A small screen, 2 buttons, green and red. That was it. No apps, no contacts. Yet the signal bars were full, meaning it had been activated beforehand. There was no further explanation, but Lydia sensed clearly this was not merely a reward. It was a challenge. She knew she was nobody important, not wealthy, not powerful, but she was the one who had seen the truth and dared to speak up. And perhaps that alone was enough to step into a world she had only ever observed from afar. She pressed the green button. Just seconds later, a message appeared. "Welcome, Lydia. Lesson 1. In this city there are watchers and there are players. Learn to live like a player." No sender name, no signature, but Lydia knew this was from him. A link appeared in the second message, a temporary email address, an accompanying password, and an attachment labeled "Start Here." She opened her computer and logged in. In the first folder lay a series of photographs. Celine with an unknown man at a Tribeca gallery. These weren't paparazzi shots, they were taken surreptitiously at the precise moment, from the exact angle, with a sharpness impossible to achieve by chance. Below each image was a caption as cold as an investigative dossier. Anonymous account transferred USD 1.2 million, extracted from May transaction report. Fake identity, Celine Leclerc equals Clarice Durant. Suspected money laundering via art auctions. This was no longer a game. This was a mission. Another message arrived. "Meet me at the East 65th Gallery, 5 p.m. tomorrow. Don't go alone. Trust no one." Lydia sank back into her chair, still clutching the black card. Last night's humiliation was gone. The wet shoes and scornful glances no longer mattered. She stood at a crossroads on one side, her old world, familiar but cramped. On the other, a perilous labyrinth that might lead to a greater truth about Celine, about Wren, and perhaps about Lydia herself. Would you dare enter a game when no one lays out the rules? Lydia already has, and there is no turning back. My dear viewers, stay tuned for the next installment that will leave you in awe. Take a moment to like and subscribe, and drop a comment below to tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always thrilling to have you join us from every corner of the globe. The glass doors of Hermes' Tribeca slid open softly, as if programmed not to make a sound that might disrupt the luxurious atmosphere inside. Lydia stepped in, wearing a lightweight trench coat, low-cut boots, and a bare, unadorned face. Among the Kelly bags and silk scarves displayed like works of art, she did not belong, but precisely that made her invisible. She had arrived 30 minutes early, as instructed in the encrypted message. On the second floor, between the cosmetics counter and the glossy black cocktail tables, Lydia spotted Celine. She stood beside a middle-aged man with silver hair, yet a youthful flair, Italian leather shoes, and a Patek Philippe watch gleaming under the ceiling lights. Lydia wasn't sure who he was, but he was not Celine's brother. They weren't acting like relatives. The way Celine leaned in to adjust his collar, whispering close to his ear, spoke the language of intimacy, not blood. She smiled softly, touched his wrist as though staking her claim. Lydia positioned herself behind a large mirror, pretending to inspect a handbag, though her eyes never left the pair. She wore tiny wireless earpieces, the kind fashion assistants use to receive private calls during events. Snippets of Celine's voice drifted through, enough to assemble a larger picture. Rothko will be in Jerome's hands next week. Yes, Monaco is ready. After this fake exhibition, we can change identities one last time. Ren never checks the charity account. Lydia's heart hammered. Rothko? Fake exhibition? Change identities? Those words cut through the refined air of Hermes like a blade hidden in a velvet box. In that moment, Lydia was no longer an art student. She was the witness to an elaborate conspiracy carried out under golden lights and champagne flutes. The two departed the store with the same courtesy as upon arrival. Lydia followed at a careful distance. On Hudson Street, they slipped into a small gallery called Maison Lune. No one entered without an invitation, but with a Centurion card, Lydia knew that door would open. And it did. Inside was a cold, minimalist white space, with only a few abstract artworks sparsely hung and unsigned. Lydia scanned the room, memorizing every face. The piece titled Blue in Drift, which she had seen in books, appeared here but was attributed to a false name, H. Laurent. No artist by that name had ever attended any academy, Lydia knew. She photographed everything using her digital contact lenses, a silent gift from Ren. The images went straight to her encrypted archive, leaving no trace on the phone. At the far end of the room, Celine was shaking hands with a Swiss collector. Lydia overheard the price, $12 million for a work with independent certification from the Langley Foundation. That foundation did not exist, or rather, had never been real. That night, Lydia sent her first report. It included images, audio clips, traced IP addresses, a catalog of the works for sale, and a single question. Who is Celine Leclerc? And where did she come from? Feedback arrived in less than an hour. Just 3 lines. Good. Next target. Find Celine's true identity. Urgent. Lydia sat silently on the rooftop of the old apartment building, looking down at Brooklyn, still fast asleep. She had once believed that great artworks were only forged in old documentaries. But now, she saw them hanging in real life, glittering lies, veiled by fame and the name of a decent man like Elias Wren. Now she was too deep to retreat. She was no longer merely someone who witnessed the truth, she was the only one who could strip it away, layer by layer. Would you dare to go on knowing that the truth could cost you everything? Yet if you don't expose it, it will destroy a decent person? Lydia was about to answer that question sooner than she thought. No one knew that Tulsa could keep a secret this long. Small towns often bury their sins deeper than Manhattan because no one pays attention. But Lydia knew where to look. For 3 days straight, she did not leave her laptop screen. Gallery records had been deleted, local newspaper archives from 2017, and hundreds of pages of art data she had never studied at Parsons. All were pieced together by a single intuition. Céline Leclerc did not exist. At last, Lydia found the photograph. The April issue of Oklahoma Visuals ran a brief article on a solo exhibition titled Colors in Absence by Clarice Durant, a young artist from Broken Arrow. In the grainy old photo, the woman wore a white dress, her hair softly curled, her gaze fixed on the camera. No makeup, but Lydia knew that was Céline, or at least who she had once been. There was no longer any doubt. This was the woman deceiving Elias Wren with another name, another past, and a stain never exposed. Yet there was more. In the photo, standing beside Clarice, was the man Lydia had met at Hermes Tribeca, now identified, Gavin Durant, Clarice's legal guardian after the sudden death of her father, renowned art collector Malcolm Durant. Then she found the old news report. Durant Gallery had been the pride of Tulsa's art community until an urgent liquidation following Malcolm's funeral. All art assets were sold off in 3 days, almost no authentication, no public auction. $12 million vanished from the Durant Foundation account. Clarice and Gavin vanished with it. Now they were repeating the same game under the name Céline Leclerc with a multi-million-dollar roster of forged paintings in Manhattan. Lydia sent the news article, photographs, and identity analysis via an encrypted channel. She knew a response would come, and this time it arrived as a summons. Museum of Modern Pieces, Thursday, 8 p.m. Spring Gala. You are my guest of honor, and they will be there too. Signed, E.W. In the rush-delivered invitation card, her name was printed in silver foil Lydia Hale, Strategic Curatorial Assistant. A fabricated title, yet one that sounded entirely plausible. Accompanying it was a black Versace dress and a simple sapphire necklace, as if every detail had been custom-measured for her pivotal entrance. That evening, she did not arrive at the museum as a disgraced waitress. She walked in as a silent cog in the machinery of power. The grand hall shimmered with crystal lights, a cello's vague notes drifted through the air, and champagne flowed like a claim. Elias Wren awaited her at the entrance for the first time. She saw him not in his gray suit, but in a black tuxedo, white gold cufflinks twinkling at his wrists. He said little. He merely nodded, as if confirming that Lydia had accomplished what he himself could not. That night, no one realized that the truth stood at the center of the hall, waiting to be revealed. Clarice Durant now, Céline entered through the side door, Gavin at her side. The same face, the same gaze. Yet Lydia saw something different, the twisted remnants of a childhood erased, and a woman who chose flight over confrontation. In Lydia's hand was a print, the photograph from the old article. On its back, she had written, "Tulsa never forgot you, and now New York will too." She slipped the photo into a small, unmarked envelope and handed it to the auction manager under the guise of updated artist credentials. In the art world, a single misattributed name can topple an entire valuation. Lydia remained motionless, silent, as Gavin ascended the podium to speak. Clarice stood behind him, clutching her clutch purse, her eyes darting as if calculating her escape routes. The truth had been released, and no glass case could shield it from the light any longer. Have you ever watched a con artist smile one last time before the world sees their real face? Lydia had. But was that enough to stop everything, or merely the beginning? Golden lights cascaded into every corner of the museum like honey poured onto silk. Each footstep echoing across the marble hall was calculated, yet no one expected that the most significant step of the night would come from the woman who a year ago was still carrying trays. Lydia wore her black couture off-shoulder gown, a vintage Patek Philippe on her wrist, the very watch Elias had left in her final gift box. She was not as dazzling as the ladies holding Dom Perignon flutes, nor accustomed to weaving glittering tales of Venice or Basel, but she moved with calm assurance, and for the first time she was fully present. Within the gala, the clink of glasses, soft laughter, and chamber music blended with anticipation. Tonight, Elias Wren, the real estate magnate and New York's premier arts patron, would donate a precious Rothko painting to a new charity, the Leclerc Fund for Future Creators. Clarice stood there, or rather, Celine, her arm linked with Gavin Durant, now titled Chief Executive Officer of the fund. Her face was flawless, but Lydia could see clearly. Her lips were pressed so tight they seemed like taut cables. Then, the moment everyone awaited began. Elias stepped onto the podium. No introduction was needed. He did not look at Clarice, nor at the painting shrouded in black velvet behind him. He simply gazed across the audience and began with a distant name, Jean Durant, a name unfamiliar to most in the room. But Lydia knew. It was Clarice's father, the man betrayed by his only daughter, and by the friend he had trusted without question. Elias spoke as though recounting a story of an old friend, an artist he once admired, who dreamed of a world where art could heal the soul. Then his voice deepened, losing any trace of nostalgia. But his gallery was forced to close after a tragic incident. His only daughter, Clarice Durant, vanished along with the family's closest friend. His name is Gavin. A silent shock rippled like an undercurrent among the tuxedos and evening gowns. The large screen behind Elias flared to life not with Rothko's image, but with the grainy 2017 photograph. Clarice standing before the Durant gallery, hair softly curled, her smile unguarded. Beside her stood Gavin unchanged, but for a few more years, and a tailored designer suit. No one uttered a word, and none was needed. The entire hall froze in silence. Clarice stepped back, her hand trembling so badly she could no longer grip Gavin's arm. Her face lost the mask she'd worn for years. Even her lipstick could not conceal the tremor of someone unmasked by a silent indictment. Gavin moved a step forward, but two security officers closed in. One whispered into his ear, presenting an official summons from the Manhattan court. No resistance was needed. Gavin walked with them as though he'd foreseen this moment. Clarice stood frozen, untouched, but the weight of every gaze in that hall was heavier than handcuffs. Then she ran. Her heels clicked across the marble corridor and through the grand museum doors like the final beat of a symphony reaching its end. No one chased her. No one needed to. She had lost not to Lydia, not to Elias, but to her own past. After the gala, Lydia stood alone by the long glass wall overlooking Central Park. Night had fallen. New York still blazed with light. A quiet moment she had never realized she craved. Elias approached, soundless. "We did the right thing," he said. "No further explanation. No thanks required." She turned to him, seeing him at last not as an icon, but as an ally. "Do you want to continue?" he asked. Lydia gazed at the paintings on the walls, the masterpieces once betrayed, the people who used art as a veneer for greed. And beyond lay the small galleries where young artists awaited someone's faith, not exploitation. She nodded. Not for money, not for power, but because she now knew truth, too, can be exhibited if someone dares to display it. Would you choose justice over safety? Lydia did. And sometimes, that is the one moment that transforms an anonymous individual into a figure of history. In a world where the wealthy can buy their silence, Lydia chose the opposite. She chose to speak out, not because she wielded power, but because she held the truth. And sometimes, truth, though fragile, can topple an entire sham. This story is about more than forged paintings or stolen identities. It is a reminder that justice need not shout, and you need not be born into privilege to enter their halls. You only need the courage not to bow. If you have ever been Lydia overlooked, standing alone with the fragile belief that integrity still matters, this story is for you. Leave a comment below. I was once Lydia, if you see yourself in her journey. We'll pin the most impactful comment at 9 p.m. New York time tonight. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss the next expose of the elite's hidden truths. Because every honest gaze holds the power to change a world.